Can you, okay, so where are you watching this from? Hi, good afternoon. Okay, Everson, Yasmine, Lavinia. Hi, Lavinia. Yasmine from Brasilia. I miss my town. You can hear me. That's great. And I can read you. I was just testing these headphones 5 minutes ago, trying to see if they were working, and I was like, but people don't actually talk back to me, so I don't need the headphones. But it felt weird to have the microphone and not have the headphones. Hello everyone. Good afternoon. So Sorocaba, São Paulo, Brasília, Rio Preto. Ai, gente, saudade de viajar, né? Mas we'll soon be we'll soon be all vaccinated, and we'll be able to travel around Rio de Janeiro. Yeah. So I'm very happy that you're here. I'm very glad and very honored to be here with Disal again. It's always a pleasure to get these invitations. This is part of my work that I love doing, which is talking to teachers specifically about this topic. I get the feeling that I'm starting to niche into this lesson planning and lesson design area. I don't even know if you can say that that's a niche, because everything is involved in lesson planning, right? So I don't know if it's a niche, but let's call it so. Someone told me that it's important to have a niche, so I'm choosing this as my niche. So thank you very much for being here. As you know, I deeply value your time, so let's get to it. It's 4:02. We're already a bit late. Shall we? Yeah. So this session is a little bit autobiographical. So I'm going to share with you my story in lesson planning and my recent readings on the topic. And I hope that by the end of this session, you have at least a clear view on how to look at your lessons from a more flexible perspective, and that in that sense it positively impacts your students. BH, Recife, Paraná. Ai, saudade Paraná, tanto tempo. Shall we go? In an attempt to get my Instagram going, just kidding, that's not the goal. Can you please scan this? This will take you to my Instagram account. It's an open account. You do not need to follow me. I'll say it again. You do not need to follow me. But I've written some questions in my stories. So I think that as a warm-up, I'd like you to go through the stories and use the slider to answer the questions. Do you mind taking 2 minutes for that? If you cannot use the scan, type my Instagram tag there and you'll be able to reach it. Okay, these are some principles and some beliefs about language teaching that we're going to use as the launch pad for what we're going to talk about today. Can you type done when you're done in the chat? It shouldn't take you more than 1 minute. Hello from Egypt. That's great. Done? Okay, cool. Ecuador, that's nice. Hello from Brazil. Which one According to the general responses that I've been getting to this, which one of them was the most, maybe the trickiest to answer, or one that you said, no, I disagree completely? Is there one? Because I tried to have some principles here that guide my teaching, but one. There is one of them that was included as the odd one out. So we have classes should be student-centered. I think this is students learn what they are taught, right? Yeah. So classes should be student-centered. Well, if classes are not student-centered, who are they centered around? Are they centered around the teacher? Are they centered around the syllabus? Are they centered around a course book? And what I find interesting is that very few teachers would disagree to this statement, right? Classes should be student-centered. That's like, duh, yeah. But I had the feeling that I was not doing that, and we're going to explore why. Students should be protagonists of their learning process. So it's similar to being student-centered. And what I find interesting about the picture of student-centeredness is that this lesson, there is no way on earth that this lesson is student-centered, right? Because there is one clear figure that is in the physical center of the classroom, right? The teacher is standing up. All students are sitting down, and all students are looking at the teacher, right? So is this student-centered? And in this same setup, are students being protagonists of their learning? If they're not the center, if everyone is looking at the teacher, if everyone's focused on the teacher, is this, are learners being protagonists? And then language learning happens in communication. This is, for me, like a super yes. We learn English by speaking English and by using English. I disagree. This is a bold statement, but I sort of disagree with Mr. Krashen that says that language learning happens through receiving input and that output is not necessary. I disagree. I think that we have not only to receive input, but also produce input to others. I think that communication, this give and take, is the means of learning and not the end product of learning. And this is key to language, to lesson design, in my opinion. We'll explore that. Students learn what they're taught. They don't, right? How many classes on the present perfect have you taught to the same group? How many times have you corrected students on the use of the third person singular as for present simple? Right? And as Patricia said, students learn so much more, right? So most of the time, not most of the times, that's me, but sometimes students don't learn, oh, don't worry, it's fine. Most of the time, some of the times, students don't learn what we teach them, but they learn despite of us. They learn during classroom interactions. They learn some expressions, some new words, maybe some grammar, new ways to interact, and sometimes not necessarily what we're teaching, right? And the last statement, Language courses should follow carefully designed grammar syllabi. I think that there are arguments pro and in favor and against this. It's easy to see the ones in favor. So, for example, you need to organize a syllabi around something. Organizing a syllabi based on grammar is what we've always done, right? We've always had grammar dragging the train of language. It's somewhat easy to grade grammar, to say this grammar structure it's a bit more simple, it's a bit easier to understand than this, and then this, and then that, then this, and then students might need this structure to be able to understand this one. I get that, right? It makes sense. It would be very hard to design a syllabus, for example, that's based on, say, another system, vocabulary. How do you grade words? Right? Do you grade words solely on the fact that this word is low frequency or that this word is higher frequency, and then words that are higher frequency are easier words to understand and to learn? I don't buy that because, for example, liberty is a word that is of lower frequency than freedom, probably. And for Brazilian speakers, for Brazilian students, for example, or students who come from Romance languages, liberty is easier because that's a cognate. And if you think of all the cognates from Romance languages, Portuguese, Spanish, and French, it's the vocabulary, the cognates that are easy for us are words that are lower frequency. And then this, a funny thing happened when you're talking to people abroad, and they might say, "Oh, your English is beautiful." It's not that your English is beautiful, that Brazilian English is beautiful. It's because we use lower frequency words because it's easy for us, right? Due to being cognates, right? So I brought these principles because principles, they are ideas and beliefs on teaching and learning, the relationship between teaching and learning a language and how language works. And I feel that having not good principles, but having clear principles and being able to I got this question. Can they sound unnatural sometimes? I think we need to. There's the issue of defining natural here, because most of the times what is seen as natural is seen as native English. And then the more native like you speak, the more natural that is. So I think we got to be careful with that. But yes, you don't want to use like very complicated, right, words to the point that you are incomprehensible, right, that people cannot understand what you're saying, right? But adding some lower frequency words here and there because they're of Latin base, I don't think it would hurt. So having these clear principles about your teaching, the things you believe in my opinion, is very, very important. This is what divides, it's the turning point between someone who teaches and a teacher. In my opinion, a teacher is a person who not only knows how, but also knows the why. So why do I teach like this? Why am I doing this, and that? And then all of these principles, they become real. They realize themselves through lesson planning. So you have your principles, you have your beliefs, and then they are immaterial, right? Their ideas, their thoughts, and then they materialize in a lesson plan. And then they become paper, right? Or digital if you're eco-friendly, be eco-friendly. And then they will become like real in class, right? When you actually do stuff with your students, right? So we teach who we are. I like that. We teach who we are. Yeah. Às vezes, because you see that we'll get to that. I really like that sentence. Let's keep that Valdomiro Arantes sentence in mind. We teach who we are, and let's keep this in mind throughout these next couple slides. So these ideas, they materialize, they become real in lesson planning. Let me tell you a story of how of my teaching experience. When I started teaching a couple years ago, I had been through an amazing English course in a fantastic school in Brasilia. At the final 2 years of my English course, I was already thinking about being an English teacher. So I sort of began to pay attention to what the teacher was doing, not in a scientific way, mind you. I was like 16 years old, but in a more artisan kind of way, like looking, okay, this is the expert. Let me see what he does. Let me see what they do, right? And then when I started teaching in a school that was not a method school. There was no method for the teaching, right? We got some schools that you have like sort of a manual that you have to follow step 1 through step 10 every class. So this was not one of them. We would plan our classes. And then as a novice teacher, my lesson planning would follow this framework. I wanted to get my students to talk. This was goal 1. I wanted my classes to be fun because I remember my teachers who were fun. I remember my teachers who were entertaining. And I wanted to, oh, come on, why should I hide it from you, right? I wanted to be remembered. I think we do, right? I think we want to be remembered by our students as someone who has positively impacted their lives. Cortella says that we all die someday, and the only way of going on living is if you live in someone else. If you live in someone else's memory, if you live in someone else's heart. So I wanted to be remembered. I wanted to be fun. And I wanted to fill a class time. So I wanted to make sure that I created activities that would get my students to talk, that they were fun, and that I would fill up all the available class time so that I was not caught off guard, as in, okay, my plan is over, is done, and I still have 30 minutes on the clock. This would actually be a nightmare of mine. Like I would have this nightmare, and I swear to God, I would have this nightmare of teaching the plan, mind you, teaching the plan, not the class, of teaching the plan and finishing the plan, getting to the end of the plan with still like 25 to 30 minutes left to go on the clock. This was terrifying for me. It was, what would I do with students? Have you ever had that nightmare of running out of your plan? Yes, Patrícia. Gente, the fear I remember being afraid of not having things to do, and then okay, what should I do with my students, right? Um, and then my lesson plan ended up being a list of fun speaking activities to fill up class time. Right? Oh yeah, Patricia. Now we have like aces up our sleeves, right? And then we can just throw something there, right? So as a novice, I used to look at teaching from a much more artsy, flexible, frightening, but colorful way of, okay, I gotta get my students to talk and I need them to have fun in class. But as you can see, there's no thought, there's no, there are no principles behind this. The only principle was, well, students learn by speaking, and students love speaking activities, so I gotta have those. Classes have to be fun, because because if the activities are not fun, my students will not speak, and then if they're not speaking, they're not learning. This was pretty much what I had. And then I took the CELTA. The CELTA is a course for a certification from Cambridge University that teaches you a way of teaching, right? Exactly, Jaji. This is what I was missing, a goal. I had no goal whatsoever for my classes. The goal was getting students to talk, period. And then CELTA taught me how to plan lessons under a framework, under a system. Because when I was a novice writing up my list of activities, I had to plan all the classes from scratch. And then CELTA gave me a framework to work with. And if you've been in my past sessions for Disal, you've seen this framework. It's the backwards design kind of thing. So you design the aim of the lesson. By the end of the lesson, my students should be better able to talk about their last vacation. And then I would create an activity to assess this aim, because I wanted to be sure that my students had achieved the aim, right? And then before my students can perform this assessment task effectively, I have to give them a controlled practice moment or moments, so that they feel confident, they feel comfortable with using maybe the grammar and the vocabulary, and then they can put it together for the assessment task. Before the controlled practice moment, I need to clarify this new language, this new use of language, this new vocabulary, this new grammar, and help students systematize the grammar, because grammar is a system, vocabulary is a system, so we can systematize that, right? Before having the language clarification, we need the input of language, because language has to come from somewhere within a context. And before I can give students input, I need a lead-in, a question to get the lesson started, to get students engaged. And it all fits like magic. I need to, and then bottom up now. I need to engage my students in class. I need to engage them with the input. And then they look at the input, they extract the language from this, the target language, the language I chose for them to analyze, and they extract this from the text. We analyze it in the language clarification moment, we systematize it, and then I give them controlled practice over these thingies that we're learning. And then after enough control practice and feedback, students can put this together in the final assessment communicative task. And then after they do this assessment task, this communicative task at the end of the lesson, I can answer the question, have my students achieved the aim or not? Right? I don't think so. The thing was, I felt very at ease and very comfortable with using this framework. And mind you, it works. It's a framework that works. Okay? So if you design your lessons like this, and I have presented this in my last webinar at Disal, it works. It works beautifully. It's great. But there is a problem. It's teacher-centered. Everything in the lesson was chosen, grinded down by the teacher. The way to engage students was designed by the teacher. The source of input was decided by the teacher. The target language of the lesson was decided by the teacher. The teacher grinded down into biteable chunks in the language clarification and handed it to students. Even if the teacher is doing some inductive teaching and asking questions, the teacher is guiding the thought. And then the teacher designs the controlled practice activities. It's controlled, it's contrived. Because we want students to succeed, we want them to feel confident. Yes, true, but it's not student-centered. The final activity, okay, maybe the final activity is a bit student-centered because, because you're sort of, right, creating a moment that students will use language communicatively, and then you don't know how they're going to do that. If you actually design a communicative activity, right, which is open-ended. But the aim was an aim that the teacher decided. So everything is the teacher. And then when you go back to students should be, say, protagonists of their learning process, where is protagonism here? I decide everything. I decide what you're going to learn, how you're going to learn it. It's not very, students are playing a part in a script that I've written, start to end. So sure, you're the protagonist in a movie that I've written and directed. That's not very protagonist in the sense of leading the learning experience, right? And this was one thing that bugged me for a very long time. That, okay, this is beautiful, this is great, but you see, I sort of felt that through going through these steps in this framework of lesson design, I have lost the artsy feel of being a teacher, the reactive thing of being a teacher, of changing the plan and doing something fun and getting students to different ways. Because again, students learn what we teach. This is false. They sometimes do, right? But how can I design an aim and take my students to this aim if I know that most students will not? Because, well, as we said before, students learn much more than we teach. Sometimes they learn an expression, and sometimes they learn some words. They learn a new way of saying something. They learn a joke that you told in class, or that a friend or a peer told in class. And then, how can I design the aim? And I decide how to assess, and I decide the road, and say that this lesson is student-centered. And then I found this book. Actually, I didn't find the book because the book's out there, right? It's Dogma. If you're familiar, you know where we're going with this. It's a book by Scott Thornbury and Luke Meddings. Is a fantastic book. Fantastic. It should be in your list. And then they wrote, to teach grammar, or rather, to promote, look at this, the delivery and consumption of grammar McNuggets. Paulo Freire, depositing knowledge in students. Grammar McNuggets, these being pre-selected, pre-graded, pre-digested grammatical items, such as the present continuous or the past perfect, irrespective of any perceived need, relevance, or utility to students. The punch I got in my stomach when I read this, I was, wow. I've been delivering grammar McNuggets to my students for quite some time. And they learned, mind you. Let's go back to that. They learn, right? Our students have been learning, right? It's not saying that it's not. But doesn't this resonate as in something that you're like, no. Right? So this was the quote that got me to think about this session and to think about a way of really going back to being artsy and to being responsive and working on what happens in class and what emerges and paying attention to students. So, and this is the headline, the head sentence of the Dogma movement. They say that we are a mix of teachers, trainers, and writers working in a wide range of contexts who are committed to a belief that language learning is both socially motivated. Why am I learning this? I want to learn this, right? There is a reason for me to learn this, and I want to learn this because it has an applicability now, not when I graduate or when I'm looking for a job. This is one of the most demotivating things I've said to my students. Students asked, teacher, why are we learning inversions? And I said, look, 14-year-old kid, when you're applying for a master's degree, you might possibly maybe use inversions. Language learning is socially motivated and socially constructed. Socially constructed in class. It's constructed in class by talking to students. Vygotsky all the way, right? Language happens through connection, through communication, right? And to this end, we're seeking alternatives to models of instruction that are mediated primarily through materials and whose objective is to deliver the delivery of grammar McNuggets. We're looking for ways of exploiting the learning opportunities offered by the raw material of the classroom, that is, the language that emerges from the needs, interests, concerns, and desire of the people in the room, not by someone else outside. Right? And this, the same way that the McNuggets resonated, it resonated with me. I want to teach language. I want to work with language that comes from the needs, interests, concerns, and desires of my students alone. So There are 10 core tenets of dogma, and I'm going to show you three, which are the three ones that Meddings and Thornbury have selected as the three main ones. Dogma is about teaching that is conversation driven. Dogma is about teaching that is materials light. And it is about teaching that focuses on emergent language. So this is what, in my opinion, we can borrow from dogma. Dogma is this philosophy of teaching that will work with students in this, mainly in this, under these three tenets. So dogma is about teaching that is conversation driven. What does that mean? Learning and teaching happen through conversation. They happen in conversation. Conversation is not the end point of this. Fernanda, we're getting to practical tips, practical actions to work on these theories. Don't worry. So dogma, it's actually this moment. So it's about teaching that is conversation driven. It's not leaving. I was observing a lesson 2 days ago. Yes, 2 days ago, that the teacher planned a lesson, beautifully planned under that framework, right? Lead in, presentation, clarification, control, practice, for your practice, and then a feedback moment at the end. The only moment that there was actual conversation in class was the final 7 minutes of the class, in which the student talked about one of their family members to the teacher, and the teacher was asking questions about the person, genuine questions about the relative. I think I said parent, right? Sorry, my mistake. And then practical tips here. It's not that you're planning, and this is a suggestion. Please don't see this as a way of doing. Okay, geez, that's not my goal. So the suggestion here is looking at the class as a conversation with teaching moments instead of a teaching moment with a conversation. In another webinar of mine, I talked about what I called the Dora Explorer effect, right? Which is the act of teachers asking display questions to students over and over and over again in class, and not asking authentic questions, right? So asking, what day is today? Wednesday. What day was yesterday? Tuesday. These sort of questions that the teacher obviously knows the answer for, and the student knows that the teacher knows the answer, right? There's no communication there. You're not talking. You're uttering sounds, right? So the suggestion here is that the whole class feels like a conversation, and perhaps like a guided conversation with some feedback on language here and there, and maybe some instructing, maybe some teaching here and there, but not a big teaching with conversation as the product, as the final product of this class, as the goal of the class. Conversation is not the goal of the class. Conversation is the class. That means asking authentic questions, questions to which I believe that if you change that thing of not stopping, but keeping it to a minimum, display questions to which you already know the answers to, and increase immensely the number of authentic questions you ask students. I believe this will give your class a much more conversational atmosphere, and it will much more than creating a role play contrived activity to simulate out of class language use language in class authentically, as in asking real questions, as asking, and it is, yes, Noeli, yeah, conversation is real life, right? So asking genuine questions instead of going, what should you do on the weekend? We always ask that question, right? So what should you do on the weekend? And so say, oh, I went to the shopping mall to buy something, and then I had lunch with my wife, and that was it. And then go, good. Open your book to page 67. Perhaps use that as a teaching moment. Like, fish more information, ask authentic questions, right? Really, where did you have lunch? What did you order? What did you buy? And then try to use this that students are bringing to class as the main topic of the lesson, right? Second tenet, dogme, is about teaching that is materials light. The idea here is using the raw, as Maddings and Thorbury say, use the raw material that is in the classroom, your students. So what is there in class that you can use as teaching material? So you can use, first and foremost, the students, their lives, their desires, what they want to do with their lives, what they did, something that happened to them while they were coming to class. Everything is material. And try using this and the reality in class, their phones, magazines, posters on the wall, posters around the school, to use as teaching material. This is a differentiation I like to make between lesson planning and lesson preparation. Whenever I observe classes and then this teacher is using a Jamboard, and then we go to Kahoot, and then from Kahoot we go to a Padlet, and then from the Padlet we go back to my slides, and then from the slides to a digital game in the book, and I'm like, it's too much fluff. It's a lot. It's what are you actually doing? What are you teaching? This is my opinion. I feel that technology comes to solve a problem. In that sense, não é ovo e a galinha. In that sense, the problem comes first, the necessity comes first, and then you find a piece of technology to solve that issue, right? That's my perspective. I have colleagues who think that the other way around, but I never bring something to class to which I don't feel the need of bringing. The last time I prepared a slide presentation for a class, it was back when I was taking the CELTA, because it was sort of a requirement back then. So we had to have slides. But after that, all my slides are for presentations, and most of them for webinars, because that's all you see, right? There is no interaction, because when we have workshops, the slide is there just to be something colorful with the name of the session. That's it, right? So being materials light means not being materials heavy. I think it's keep to the bare minimum and make the most out of the minimum. Very good question, Stefania. Even in online lessons, I would say keep it to what you need, and be careful in assessing what is a need and what could be becoming a clutch, as in, I use this to facilitate my work instead of I use this to produce better communication and conversational moments in class. Does that make sense? Right? And 3, dogma is about teaching that focuses on emergent language. So you're going to work, and we're sort of good in doing this. We're sort of good at doing this, sorry, of getting what students produce and working on it. We elicit all the time, right? We're sort of good in eliciting, but this would be going the next mile. So when you're teaching that focuses, when your teaching is focusing on emergent language, not only will you be eliciting from students here and there, but you will be using what comes from the class. And sometimes it's not the language that comes, like the say the expression or the structure that comes, but it's the need. And then you're talking about, I don't know, plans for the future. And then the student will go, say like a basic student who does not know how to use the future in English. And then the need for the future will emerge. And then when the need for the future emerges, you teach it. And then you might elicit from students, oh, how'd you say that? How'd you say this? Oh, this, that. Good. If they know, if you manage to elicit the language they need, fine, have it on the board and then work on it. And then work on it. It's a teaching moment. That is a teaching moment. The rest of it is a conversation moment. And then after students have felt the need to talk about future situations, then you give them the language that they need at the point of need. And then you will systematize the language that they need at the point of need. And as an experienced teacher, you can bring out up your sleeve an activity to get them to work with the language a little before they can go back to talking about what really matters, their plans for the future. So what dogma brings is this idea that instead of planning a whole lesson, you will plan a conversation moment, a conversation activity, and then out of this conversation, the lesson will grow. As Letitia, is it? I probably did not pronounce your name correct. I'm sorry. It is an approach that it is a bit extreme, and it is difficult to manage for teachers. So it is adapting to what happens in class, being able to analyze any piece of language that comes up, right? It's not something that a teacher, a novice teacher can apply effectively. But definitely, as Letitia puts it in her comment, all in for a mixed approach. We're not going to ditch lesson plans altogether. But if we keep in mind these 3 tenets, it is my belief that classes will be more fun, they will be more conversational. If they're being more conversational, classes are going to be more productive. They're going to have this feeling of authenticity throughout the whole lesson, and not only at the final stage of the class, right? So, and then I think that this is something to wrap up. We tend to focus a lot on accuracy, right? On having students produce language accurately. And to which Michael Lewis says that communicative competence is a much wider concept than accuracy. We have to learn to value fluency, confidence, and imagination, as well as accuracy, and recognize. And this is the final punch, I think, and recognize that accuracy will, whatever methodology is employed, always be the last element of competence to be acquired. And this is the end of today's session. Thank you for being here. Yes, I can return to the previous slide. Yes. I hope this has made sense to you. I hope that you give a second thought of including more, not including, that's not even the right word, of making lessons more conversational, right? And asking genuine, authentic questions, and not because you have an agenda and you want to check if students know how to use the present perfect, but because you're interested in the students as people. Because then, as you get interested in them as people, they'll get interested in you, and you're going to have wonderful conversations, which will produce immense amounts of language, which can then be further analyzed with students and systematized and help and be acquired because they were produced by students and they were provided at the point of need. And this is, in my opinion, a much more student-centered approach than what I used to be doing. And thank you very much for being here. There are some interesting links there, I think. Gente, esse negócio de YouTube é muito difícil. Here, I think. Do click it and have a look. Okay? Thank you very much for being here. It's always a pleasure. And goodbye.